real quick, if you have a story to tell, please reach out via email at contact@campfirecultpod.com or leave me a voicemail message at 720-297-8608. Also, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Campfire Cult Pod for free. It'll really help us reach listeners just like you. If you want to become a Patreon cult member to get extended episodes and other full Patreon-only episodes, you can sign up at patreon.com/campfirecultpod for only $5 a month. And finally, if you don't mind, please share, rate, and review wherever possible. Welcome, dear listener, to the Campfire Cult Podcast. From a camper van deep in the haunted woods, I bring you first-hand accounts of chilling encounters with the paranormal. Step into the night and take a peek into the realm where reality and the supernatural collide. My name is Jazz, and I'll be your host. Welcome back, campers, and happy New Year's Eve. Hope everyone has some fun plans for this evening and has a great 2025 coming up. Tonight, we're headed back deep into the wilderness and covering a topic that's as mysterious as it is legendary: the enigmatic and often highly debated Bigfoot. I'll be sharing 10 true encounters that might just make you think twice about venturing into the woods alone. For me, the Bigfoot legend is more than just a story. It's a connection to my childhood. When I was a kid, camping wasn't exactly my idea of fun. But my family knew how to spark my imagination. They'd weave tales of Bigfoot lurking in the shadows of the forest, turning our camping trips into adventures filled with wonder and just enough fear to be embedded into my memories forever. Those stories planted the seeds of my fascination with Bigfoot and the mysteries of the wild. So turn off the lights, grab a flashlight, settle in, and prepare to hear some chilling stories of real-life encounters with the elusive Bigfoot. Who knows? By the end of this episode, you might just find yourself keeping an eye on the tree line during your next outdoor adventure. I know I do. Up first, a Delaware resident who never believed in Bigfoot had a life-changing encounter in 2017 while exploring nearby woods.
I'm from Delaware. I guess I should start by saying I never truly believed in anything like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or swamp apes. Before my encounter, I watched a couple of those silly Finding Bigfoot shows as a general interest when they first came out. But to me, it was just a show about some idiots walking in the woods at night. I watched a couple of episodes and laughed at them and moved on. I always considered myself an open-minded person to all things probable. But Bigfoot, at the time, was way out of my scope of consideration. Outside of the famous Patterson film and the Sierra Sounds, I never heard anything more on the topic. Unless someone was making a joke or some new TV series or movie about the topic came on. As for what I saw, it was nothing spectacular. Not like what I had heard, but it was enough to make me a true believer. My encounter happened on November 20th, 2017, on the outskirts of Bear, Delaware. A close friend of mine and I had just moved there from Long Island, New York. Our home was a duplex that was at the end of a dead-end street. At the very end of the street was an old rusted and ivy-covered chain-link fence that was so overgrown and bent over. Beyond the fence, it was all woodland, and the look of the area had enchanted me to check it out. My friend and I are photographers for various Renaissance fairs. We would find wooded areas to take photos of people in their garb. I asked our new neighbors about the woods, and they said we should not go back there. They told us people have gone in those woods and have come out with injuries from a variety of animals. A couple of boys had drowned in the swamp back there many years before. In her words describing the swamp, "You'll never see it until you're in it." Despite this warning, I really wanted to check it out for myself. On the day in question, my friend left that morning to visit her mother, and I stayed at the duplex. The weather was cold and windy, and it was a cloudy day with the feeling that we might be getting snow. I was so bored that I decided it was time to investigate the woods. I did not take my camera with me because I didn't plan to take any pictures. I wanted to see if the terrain was not a trip hazard before I lugged in an expensive camera. I wanted to just make it back there to get an idea of the area. It was literally right next door to the duplex. I stepped over the fence and walked into the woods some 50 feet. After that point, the more I walked in, I started to get this ominous feeling building up about me, but I tried to shake it off. The ground was all covered with what looked like many years of fallen leaves and sticks, so it was like stepping on a 10-inch shag carpet. The trees were shedding whatever leaves still dared to cling on. I couldn't walk in this deep, leafy area without making noise. I found a small open area and stopped to consider if it was a good spot to take pictures. Looking around that area for about 15 minutes, I saw nothing much of interest to use for a photo shoot. That ominous feeling was still hanging around me. It never dawned on me till days later that I never heard anything in those woods the whole time I was in there. No birds, frogs, toads, or any other wildlife. Granted, it was close to winter, but still, even in New York, birds were whistling about in the snow. I decided the area was dull and nothing to speak of, so I planned to find some other wooded place to take pictures. I began to head back to the fence when I began to hear a second pair of footsteps walking somewhere far behind me. I stopped, turned, and looked about. I saw no one nor any animal, so I figured my ears were playing tricks on me. I went to turn to leave, but before I could take a step, I heard the footsteps again. It sounded like someone slowly walking, not running. I turned about again, and this time I saw something step from beyond the trees from my right, about 30 feet away from me. It was reddish in color, close to the same color as the leaves on the ground, but its face was pinkish gray. I slowly squatted down where I stood and watched as this hairy-covered thing just meandered through the woods. It stood erect and walked like a person, not hunched over and cumbersome like an orangutan or gorilla. Its legs were directly in line with its body, whereas a gorilla or orangutan walked more bow-legged. Its hair was long, and I do mean hair. It was not fur. When the wind blew, the hair waved about, and I could see its pinkish-gray skin underneath in a few places. That's when I became concerned and aware that this was no person in a suit. My first thought was someone was trying to prank me or make a film. I looked about to see a cameraman or someone, but it was just me in this thing. I also remember thinking of Bigfoot from the shows on TV, but this thing was not 10 to 12 feet tall like I had heard people say they encountered. It was probably not much taller than me, and I'm 6 feet tall. It was thin, more like a person. I could not say if it was strong with muscles because the wind was blowing its long hair and blocking me from seeing any musculature, as well as parts of its face. Then, about halfway through this incident, I started to pick up a bad smell. It was like rancid meat that had been sitting out for a week. I think, had it not been for the wind, I would have smelled it sooner. What stood out the most to me was its ears, which, as best as I can describe, were like pig ears. They were pinkish and stuck outwards, but were oval, like a human ear. The hands were massive compared to its body. It was walking like a person, just slightly bent over, as if it were watching its way. I could not make out much of its face because of the wind, but I know at one point I saw the whites of its eyes just for a second. The only parts of its body that were not covered in hair were its face, chest, parts of its belly, hands, and the inner parts of its wrists and arms. But as I said, it was coated in hair, not fur. So it was not well covered, not like a dog, cat, or other animal. You would think such a critter would be freezing to death. The hair looked like it served very little protection from the elements. I continued to watch it. 3 or 4 times it bent down like I was, squatting or perched, as some people would call it. I watched as it moved the leaves with its right hand and stuck its hand into the dirt. It looked like it was looking for something. Whatever it was searching for, it knew where to look. Then it got up, walked more, and repeated its actions. The 3rd time it bent down and did this search thing, it found something in the ground, pulled it out, and put it to its mouth. I could not see it clearly. Then, as its back was somewhat toward me, it stood and walked on. I did not move a muscle at all. My back and legs were starting to ache something bad. I watched this thing for a good 5 to 6 minutes, and I was starting to regret not taking my camera. It just walked on till I couldn't see it anymore. I waited a bit longer. I wanted to make sure whatever it was would not hear me leaving. The one thing I still ponder about is that, even though I was squatted down while watching it, it never noticed me. If it did, it certainly didn't care if I was there or not. I mean, I was squatted down, but not behind anything. Its head stayed hung low, like it was looking for something as it walked, or like it was just watching its step. But it never looked further than that. I never told my friend what I saw, at least not at first. I just said it was not interesting at all for picture taking. The sighting spooked me for a couple of nights because, in my head, I kept thinking that nothing was stopping it from stepping over that broken fence and into our open yard. Since my bedroom faced the woods, I started to spook myself with the idea of waking up at night and seeing it in my window. My only comfort zone was that our neighbors had a German shepherd that could deal with it if need be. That's what I thought at the time. Now, knowing the reputation dogs and Sasquatch have, I'm not too sure that German shepherd would have done much good. Eventually, my interest grew on the topic of cryptids, and I told my friends and neighbors what I had seen back there. The neighbors were miffed that I went back there and said, "We told you not to." Then the guy broke down and told me that one day, when he first moved into the duplex years before, he took the dog back there and saw the same thing. The dog went wild and barked at it. He went on and said the hairy thing faced them, got angry, grabbed a small fallen branch, and threw it at him and the dog. But more like a warning. I drew an image of what I had encountered rather quickly and asked if what he saw in the woods looked like what I drew. "That's exactly what I saw," he said, and his voice started to get shaky. I found this odd for a man who was a master trainer and owner of the martial arts dojo in the area. From there, I just started researching the topic and found myself drawing and painting what I saw. Admittedly, I did go back in the woods about 6, maybe 7 times with a camera in hand, but I never saw it again. After almost 4 years, my friend and I parted ways and I moved back to New York in 2020. At first, the whole experience spooked me. But now, looking back at the whole event, I'm glad it did happen. What I saw opened my eyes and mind. At the very least, it has given me a new interest. I'm not sure if I want to see one again or not. Maybe from a distance where I'm safe.
Next, a man recalls a chilling 1983 encounter with a Sasquatch in Scotland and a second event in France.
My first experience was way back in 1983. I was 14 and was on a youth group weekend camp in the Perthshire area of Scotland. The group was going to play a team war game called the Wide Game. 2 teams were each given a bucket to hide and protect. Each team member was given a piece of colored wool as a life. The object was to find and take the other team's bucket back to your own. If you took another player's life, the piece of wool, you returned it to the leaders. You'd then get another piece of wool, another life, and rejoin the game. The winner was the team with the most opposition lives and possibly their bucket. The game lasted for a couple of hours. This particular game was to take place at night. Each player was supposed to carry a flashlight. Before dark, I set out up to the tree line and some rhododendron bushes. As I neared the trees and bushes, I thought I saw someone watching me. At that point, I wasn't scared. I thought it might be a deer. As I grew closer, I realized it wasn't a deer. It resembled an Ewok from Star Wars, only the eyes and mouth were visible. Again, I didn't feel scared. In fact, I felt more intrigued. I said, "Hello?" I felt like this Ewok-like thing said hello back to me in my head. I saw a small arm reach out and point to my head. I was a couple of feet away from the dense trees and bushes. I could only see the eyes, mouth, and arm. This creature's arm and hand were just about to touch my forehead. Suddenly, I started to feel scared. The fear came rushing in waves. From behind this creature, another one appeared. It was much, much larger than the first. In my head, I heard, "Don't you dare! Don't you dare!" The larger being's eyes turned red. I got the sense it was the juvenile's mother. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I was about a third of a mile from the campsite. There were about 40 other people there, ages 12 to adult. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I could see my fellow campers getting ready to play the wide game. The next thing I knew, a number of older campers were saying my name. They were touching my back and I was lying on the ground. The wide game was over and it was dark, around 11 p.m. After a count of players, I was missing. The group set out to search for me. They found me easily because my torch was on. It was lying on the ground facing the camp, just a foot in front of my head. The camp leaders thought I slipped and hit my head on a stone. They assumed I dropped my torch, which led them to me. I was taken to the hospital, and my parents were called. That was the end of my weekend camping trip. I can tell you, I never had my torch on. It was firmly in my trouser pocket. I didn't need to use it as it was still light. I believe the juvenile was so intrigued with me that it wanted to touch me, and the juvenile's mother wasn't happy about it. The mama Sasquatch used some kind of mind control to freeze me. My young body couldn't cope and I passed out. Being a mother, the Sasquatch turned on my torch. I think she did it so the youth leaders could find me in the dark. Now, 20 plus years later, I was in France. I had spent 12 years as a military medic with the Royal Marine Commandos. I was helping friends at their Stone Farm cottage. On the third or fourth night, I decided to go for a walk in the woods. These woods were at the back of her property. After about 20 minutes, I froze. A voice in my head said, "Don't you dare!" The fear within me was exactly the same as when I was 14 years old. I've faced a lot of fear in my life and overcome it. My time in the military taught me that. But this fear was nothing like anything else. I don't know if it was the same Sasquatch or the juvenile grown up. It was a different country, a different location. But it was exactly the same voice, same tone, in English. There was no French accent. It must have been just a few seconds in time. I didn't see anything, only heard the voice. I think I said, "No, not again. Not this time." I backed away and walked the same path back to my friend's home. I didn't say anything to my friend. However, she noticed my anguish. She said, "I don't like these woods." She only goes into them during the daytime. I suspect she's had an experience too. I don't know what happened to me after my first experience. Was I lying there the whole time or taken somewhere? I believe the Sasquatch I felt in France was the same one. It sounds impossible. I think Sasquatch can port to any place in the world. How they do that, I have no idea. That's way above my understanding.
Coming up, I'm bringing it close to home with this next story. While camping in newly purchased land in Washington, a woman encounters mysterious tree formations, howls in the night, soft vocalizations resembling a language, and bipedal footsteps circling her camper while she slept.
I wanted to share this story. Though it doesn't involve a sighting, it involves all the other evidence that is difficult to ignore. We've bought land in Washington recently. It'll be about a year before we start building there. But we visit periodically, and I just recently came back from a 2-day camping trip on the land. A few months back, we pulled into a dirt road leading onto our property and noticed a perfect pyramid of trees that had been interlocked into a tapestry that simply couldn't have happened by human hands. One reason is that the pyramid-like interlocking, which was clearly done with skill, was at least 6 feet off the ground. We joked that maybe some teenagers could have done it, but I personally really doubted that some kids could climb up the trees, 6 feet high, and successfully bend tree trunks into an interlocking grid that high up. It would take far too much force and power. I don't even think grown men could get such thick trees to bend in this fashion. The trunks had to have been at least 8 to 9 inches in diameter, so we're talking strong tree trunks, not bendable baby limbs. Fast forward to the previous weekend, we pulled onto our property late at night after sundown, arriving late on Friday night. Within 5 minutes of arriving, I heard loud, haunting, ape-like howls that didn't sound anything like a wolf, bear, or normal animal sounds. I've spent enough time in the woods in my life to know when I'm hearing something that isn't elk, bear, owl, or dog. These howls were human-like. And it was clear that something enormous was sending a message out there. It did it 4 to 5 times, then it stopped. We slept the first night without issue, except for one thing. The very next morning, a tree had been bent like a perfect rainbow directly over the trail, 10 feet away from our truck. Perfectly going over the trail in an upside-down U-shape over the road. The second night was the night that was remarkable. Within 15 minutes of hitting the sack in our teardrop trailer, windows were open and I was enjoying the forest breeze. I immediately heard footsteps, distinct human bipedal footsteps walking around the trailer. It moved with a pace that was distinctly two-footed, and it was clearly large, much like a metronome beating. Leaves were all over the ground, which made it easier to hear the pacing footsteps. This went on for at least an hour. Then it stopped. I placed my hand in a cup-like position behind my ears to help increase my hearing abilities. I fell asleep for a few hours, then awoke to the same human-like crunching footsteps right outside the trailer. I then heard actual talking from what I believe was a Bigfoot. One might say it was gibberish, but to be honest, it was clear they had an actual language. Somehow I felt that it was female. The obvious soft vocalization sounded like some sort of affirmation sounding noises. It sounded like words, only the voice was clearly deep, and not the sort of voice a regular human being could emulate due to the depth of the voice. I'm sure it wasn't humans pranking us. It spoke softly to another one by using some sort of enunciation, and so this was no longer just howling, but literally some type of talking. Obviously, it wasn't English, but it was most certainly a human-like vocal tone communicating. Next, I heard the trees begin to bend. This went on for an hour, and it was directly happening right outside of the teardrop trailer. I knew I was going to wake up to more bending activity. For some reason, I didn't feel scared. I have always been psychic a little when it comes to feeling intentions of humans or animals around me. Something deep inside of me felt that these beings were loving, kind, sort of like protectors of the forest. I listened to them as long as I could, until I was just too tired to continue listening to their activities outside of the trailer. The following morning, there were 3 more trees perfectly folded, curved, like arches, right over the trail next to our truck. One was directly at the nose of the truck. Somehow, I feel that they were saying, "Welcome." I think they know we purchased the land. Look, if they had wanted to hurt us, they could have. They never touched our stuff, touched the trailer, nor did they attempt to scare us. If anything, it was like they were attempting to not scare us and wanted to be as quiet as possible. I felt that the female was guiding the whole event that night. Can anyone tell me more about the tree-bending formations? And if there's any clues as to which formations mean what? My heart tells me that they did this to say hello in a loving and kind way. It hasn't scared us, and we still plan on building there. I had an idea that if we go camping there again in the fall, I'm going to tie flowers around the trunks that they bend to let them know, we accept you and honor you. I refuse to have bad feelings between the Bigfoot and us. I want us to cohabituate on the land peacefully. My first impressions of these beings is that they are not out to hurt anyone, and that they might even be able to communicate with humans if humans would treat them with respect and not try to hunt them down. They're bipedal and obviously have above average intelligence, judging by the fact I heard an actual language coming out of one.
Next, in 1974, in the Tahoe Yosemite Trail's desolate wilderness, 3 campers witnessed strange lights, eerie sirens, and distant voices.
Before I detail my experience, let me provide a brief introduction. I've been camping, fishing, and hunting most of my life. I spent quite a bit of time in the forest and bush. I have thought about this since it happened years ago and dreamed about it too. It has not been until quite recently that I thought this strange experience could be related to Sasquatch. It was mid-August 1974. The location was the Tahoe Yosemite Trail portion of the Pacific Crest Trail, also known as the Desolation Wilderness. This area isn't far from where Ron Moorhead recorded the Sierra Sounds. I and 2 friends were backpacking for a week west of Echo Summit on Highway 50. We were camped out at Lake Ralston, near Ralston Peak at over 8,000 feet. The area was surrounded by granite and sporadic high timber. One night, all 3 of us experienced some very weird phenomena. There was a bright white light shining through the trees to the southeast of us. It stayed stationary and it was incredibly bright. It was significantly brighter than any star, although the stars were beautiful at that elevation. It wasn't Venus and it was not present on any other night. We also heard what can be described as a siren-like sound. It sounded like a whoop whoop and repeated with almost no break for several minutes. Then the siren-like sound stopped, and we heard what we thought were voices calling. We could all make out the words. These vocals were coming from the direction of the light and siren-like sound. All the sounds were fairly distant, certainly at least a few hundred yards back. They came from the direction we had hiked into where we were camped. These phenomena occurred simultaneously. The siren-like sound ended, then the first voices started out light. The voices stayed present throughout the entire experience. It lasted for half an hour, then nothing. We didn't see anything unusual or smell anything rank. We acknowledged that this experience was very strange. We thought maybe there was a fire or someone was lost, which is what we assumed was happening. We didn't experience anything like that again for the rest of our stay. We hiked out a few days later. We checked at the lodge at Echo Lakes. They didn't know what we were talking about. They said there had been no fires or searches for any lost hikers during the week. None of us mentioned anything about Sasquatch. After hearing Ron Moorhead's recordings and Les Stroud's experiences, it dawned on me. These types of phenomena have all been experienced by others. Perhaps our weird experience was of a hairy people origin. I'm open to people's input.
Up next, at Camp Timberlake near Mount Rainier in the 1960s, a camper recalls a chilling encounter with massive, hairy figures.
My name is JG, and I am 48 years old. When I was a child, I used to go to church camp at different camps through public welfare assistance. We didn't have much money, and my mother would send me to camp every summer. This summer was different for me, for it was the first summer I was going to camp by myself. My sister would go with me in previous years. I'm not sure where the camp is located, other than it was near Mount Rainier, Washington. The camp was named Camp Timberlake, now Camp Arnold. This was a brand new camp, and it was the opening summer for the camp. The camp had Boys Town and Girls Town. There was a lake that had a dock with a slide that spiraled. The dock floated out a few yards from the shore. All the cabins were A-frames with a loft for the counselors. Between the boys' cabins and the girls' cabins was the dining hall. I had a lot of fun that summer swimming, shooting guns, and bow and arrows. The cabins were set within the fir trees, and we had about 8 boys per cabin. I think there were about 50 to 70 kids in camp. I was only about 10 to 12 years old. It was about the 3rd day of camp when everything changed. We had retired for the night, and everyone was in bed. I was awoken by loud noises. The counselor told us all to stay in our beds. I remember the boy who slept in the top bunk above me. I called him Silvertooth, for his front tooth was silver. He looked out the window and said he saw several large, hairy men around the water tower and the cabins. He said they were 10 feet tall. I was scared, so I hid under my covers and wished it would stop. The counselor was upset and said for us all to stay in our beds and to stay away from the door and windows. After what seemed to be hours, the ruckus stopped and we went to sleep. The next morning, when we went outside, just in front of our cabin was a 30 to 40-foot fir tree tipped over. The root ball was up in the air with a hole in the ground about 8 feet. There were human-like footprints everywhere. There must have been several of them, and of different sizes. I saw hundreds of footprints everywhere. They were from 8 inches to maybe 14 inches in length. They were depressed into the ground about 1/4 inch. You could see the toes, maybe 4 or 5. I was pretty young and don't remember exactly. They took us for a walk that day around the perimeter of the camp. I remember them telling us that the girls played a joke on us. They said we were going to play a joke on them that night. One counselor said, "You should see the dogs here. They are 5 feet tall." As we walked, we came to the water tower where Silvertooth saw the 10-foot men. There were large footprints all around the water tower. When we got to the lake, something had pulled a bunch of algae or seaweed out, and it was everywhere. That night, we played a scary record. It didn't sound anything like the night before. The counselor said we really got back at those girls. When we woke up the next morning, they told us we were going home early. We loaded the bus to come home 2 or 3 days early. Back in those days, I never heard of Bigfoot. Later in my life, the movie Bigfoot came out, and I went to see the movie. When the Bigfoot came into the camp, it brought me back to the night in camp and the noises I heard that night. As an adult, I often think about that night. I wonder how I could get a hold of someone else who was at Camp Timberlake that summer night. I know that all the adults must have seen them and even got some photos. My older sister said that she went to that camp on Mount Rainier. At the gate, it has a sign that says, "The only known sighting of Bigfoot."
Coming up, while fly fishing in Northern California, 3 friends encounter a terrifying 10-foot tall Bigfoot.
2 of my friends and I, we live in Northern California. We're on a fly fishing trip from Mount Hood in Oregon. We made our way southeast and linked up on the Rogue River, then down to Hat Creek and the Pitt River. We were not in a campground that you can reserve online. It was super primitive. We fished the entire day, and then at like 5 to 6 p.m., we made our way upriver to our campsite. We hiked a few miles downstream and fished our way up. Black ant pattern size number 18, if anyone is wondering. There was a group of 3 other fly fishermen, classic Toyota Tacoma dudes, about 50 feet to the east, or upriver. At about 7 p.m., it's still light because it's the end of summer. We were cooking bratwurst over the fire pit. We started to hear rustling and branches breaking somewhere in the forest upstream. This is where the most chaotic, mayhem in slow motion event of my life unfolded. The campers that were 50 feet away came running toward us at full speed and yelled, "Holy fuck! Did you see that thing?" They had this look of pure terror on their faces. Before that sentence was even finished, this low-bass, super loud roar came from the tree line about 20 feet away. Suddenly, a full-sized buck came sliding out on its side, legs kicking in the air as it tried to get traction. Imagine a house cat sliding across an ice rink. That's what it looked like. The deer bashed straight into our campfire, sending sparks, hot dogs, and burning branches everywhere. The deer stood up right beside me, in between my 2 friends and me. The 3 guys from the neighboring campsite were to my right. No kidding, this deer was within 2 feet or less from me. The deer looked toward the forest where it came from, and all our eyes followed. There stood a gigantic creature, like an 8 to 10 foot tall human thing covered in hair. It was the same color as a Rottweiler, dark brownish black all over, with light brown around its face and hands. Its hair was probably 2 to 3 inches long. It was pure confusion. We didn't move. Bigfoot didn't move. And the deer just stood there. None of us moved for at least a full minute. Then Bigfoot just left, walking like a human with a stride scaled to its massive size. It walked up the bank, across the dirt road, and then up the mountainside. The deer darted off downriver to the west. I can't explain why we didn't pack up and leave immediately. When I replay this scenario in my head, I pack up and leave. But in reality, I think we were all in shock. The other campers moved one of their tents into our campsite. They all slept in one tent, and my 2 friends and I slept in my 2-person tent. The next morning we left. Between our truck and campsite, we found a dead deer. I can't say for sure if it was the same one, but its ribcage was split open and everything inside was gone. We wondered if it could have been poachers, but nothing important was taken. That night, I was so beyond scared, and I stayed that way for a solid month after. I remember feeling like I wanted to vomit, and I still get nauseous thinking about and retelling the story. It was so weird, but I wish I could see one again. I don't think I believed it was going to kill us. It felt more like I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. It was something I had been told wasn't supposed to exist.
Up next, a father and son's early deer hunting trip turns terrifying when something stalks them in the dark, culminating in a chilling encounter at dawn.
The encounter starts off when I'm either 7 or 8 years old and deer hunting with my dad in northern Chaka County. We're on a family friend's land that had a lot of deer sign. I remember it being pitch black dark. My dad never got out in the woods this early, but it was middle of rut and he was persistent. We had to follow train tracks for about 3/4 of a mile. You then come to a train trestle, and the bottom was about 500 to 600 yards from there. Everything was normal, other than how early we got out there and it still being pitch black. Once we crossed the trestle, my dad started getting a bit weird. I thought I could hear something pacing us, just off the tracks, maybe 5 to 10 feet into the woods. We had an old mag light, but it was on the ass end of its batteries and provided very little help. This went on for the 1/4 mile left till the bottom. When we got there, he was acting strange. I'd been in the woods with him since I was 3, until this day had never seen this man scared like this. We cleared out a spot, leaves and such to not make noise while we sat and hunted. I just remember how quiet it was. No birds, no squirrels running around. Nothing. Dad was still acting weird, but got better around daybreak. When the sun came up, everything was back to normal. No weird feelings, birds chirping, etc. About 7:15 a.m., all sound stopped, and we started hearing crashing through the woods. My dad was still visibly shaken. He handed me his Remington 700 30-06 with a nice Bushnell scope on it. Till the day I die, I'll never forget what he told me. It's a big buck. As soon as he comes out, shoot it. About 150 yards down the bottom, I started seeing limbs breaking. I saw the outline of something 7 to 8 feet tall and super dark brown with my own eyes before I saw it in the scope. When I put the rifle up to my shoulder and scoped to my eye, I saw this thing tear down a 20 to 25-foot pine. I immediately became terrified. I tried to hand the rifle back to my dad, and he just kept telling me, "Shoot it! It's a big buck! Shoot it!" He wouldn't even look at it through the scope. This thing came out about 75 yards from us and was huge. I looked through the scope at what I could not identify other than the classic description of Bigfoot. It had almost nappy, if not matted hair all over. I relayed what I was seeing to my dad, but he just kept telling me to shoot. I got the weirdest feeling, though terrified, when I got it squared in the crosshairs. It was like I was seeing something I shouldn't have seen, and at the same time, it was telling me not to shoot it. I watched it till I got chills, and then dropped the rifle. I got my ass chewed out by my dad for that move. I begged him to look, just freaking look. He wouldn't. He just kept telling me to shoot it. I was terrified and got up out of our spot to run. He grabbed me and told me to shoot it one more time. I shouldered the rifle, squared it up, and once again, some weird feeling came across me. It felt like I'd be killing a human or something. At my age, I had no clue what was happening. I begged my dad to take the gun. When I got the rifle back up, it was gone. My father and I didn't talk about this for another 30 years. He's a no-nonsense high school football coach, you know the type. I brought it up at our family Thanksgiving a few years ago. I also found out he thought whatever it was started stalking us prior to us crossing the trestle. He heard something hit the water when we crossed. Weird thing, I had nightmares for years of this thing, somehow following me back to my house. It would just watch me, barely in the woods, outside of the house I lived in. I've had a few weird encounters in the woods since, but nothing like this.
Next, while lost in the Arkansas wilderness in 1970, 2 Boy Scouts encountered a tall, black-haired creature.
This happened in 1970 or maybe 71. I was 14 or 15. My friend and I were in the Boy Scouts, and that summer we went to Arkansas to do a couple of hikes for some merit badge, if I remember correctly. One of them was the Butterfield Hiking Trail. The trail started in Devil's Den State Park, and that is where we camped. When we awoke, we started the hike. Remember, this was 1970, the trail wasn't marked well and not that heavily traveled. Our gear was rudimentary. I'm not even sure I had real boots. All our gear was pretty much Army surplus stuff, canteens, compass, tents. We must have had a map, but I think it was not much better than a hand-drawn map. I just checked, and today it says the trail is 15 miles. It certainly wasn't then, and we had planned to do it as a day hike, carrying just a canteen each, the map, and a compass. Being scouts, we probably had some sort of first aid kit we put together. There was a trailhead we could walk to when we got up in the morning. Initially, the trail was pretty well beaten down. The terrain wasn't too tough. It was a deciduous forest with very thick underbrush. It was also summer, so it would get pretty hot, and there was a lot of humidity. I don't recall anything unusual or exciting for most of the hike until the trail we were following eventually petered out. I really have no idea how far we hiked, but it was pretty hot and late afternoon, I think. We realized we were lost and it was probably too late to head back the way we came. While trying to figure out what to do, we believed we heard a motor vehicle in the distance off to the west. We figured getting to a road would be the best option, but to get there, we would have to bushwhack through dense underbrush. At least it was downhill, so we headed down the hill. Again, not sure how long or far it was, but we broke out onto a very nice, wide, and well-traveled trail. Hallelujah! We were really hot and tired from going through the brush, so we sat down to rest and drink some water. We were both relieved to at least find a well-traveled trail. We could also hear what we thought might be a creek flowing. This is where things got weird. While we were resting, we heard something in the bush just up the slope, not too far away, call out. The best way I could try to describe it is like some sort of monkey-ape yell. Just after that yell, we heard a tree shake and a thud. We could see the top of this very big tree swaying, but couldn't see what was causing it. This was also upslope and really not that far away. The trail we had found pretty much ran horizontal down the slope. That was the direction we had planned on going. There was a dip in the trail and a curve that went out of visual sight. We were curious about what was making the noise. I told my friend to start down the trail and I would hang back and stay kneeling where I was. The thought was maybe the creature that screamed would show itself, thinking we both had taken off. My friend disappeared out of sight and the creature we heard called out again. This time, another creature further down the trail where my friend went yelled back. I couldn't see anything through the brush and realized hanging back wasn't the best idea, so I got up and started down the trail. I then realized the trail wasn't too far from where the tree shook. By this point, I was feeling pretty uncomfortable. I got to where the trail headed straight down the hill, and my friend was waiting there. We headed down. My friend was in the lead, and as soon as we started down, I heard something running through the brush from where we had just come. I immediately yelled at my friend to run. I wasn't sure it was running after us or not, but I looked back over my left shoulder and saw it running back up the trail we had just come down. Like I said, the brush was thick, and I only caught glimpses. Except for one point where I could see its chest, shoulder, and face. I was running down the hill looking back, and it was running up the trail and looking down at us. It's crazy. It's been almost 55 years, and I vividly remember the whole encounter. It was only glimpses. I saw black hair and the face had a sheen from the sun. It was looking at us while we were running west and into the sun. I know it was pretty tall because walking down the trail, I could not see anything downslope. This thing was tall enough to be seen and see us. The rest is anticlimactic, but I should go ahead and finish the story, I suppose. We kept running down the hill until we came out of the brush, into a clearing with a herd of cattle next to the creek we heard. We thought we saw a bull and sprinted across the creek. Nothing had chased us. And there was also the road we had heard. A gravel dirt road, but a road just the same. We headed north, I believe, and eventually a guy in a pickup drove by and gave us a ride to our camp. That night, I remember washing my clothes at the campground laundry. I talked to a park ranger and told him about our day. He didn't think we were crazy and said people see some pretty strange things out there. This was before the internet, and I really had not heard anything about Bigfoot sightings. Now with the internet and reading all the people's experiences, I nod my head because I know exactly what some of these people are talking about. Like I said, I'm older, and I stayed in touch with my friend all these years. I wanted to confirm what I remembered with him, and this is what he remembers as well. Although when I yelled run, he did just that and didn't look back, so he didn't see what I saw. Sorry this was so long, but I felt I needed to document my story.
Coming up, while hiking in Oregon's remote Cascades, a woman was stalked by something huge.
I was hiking in the Cascades in Willamette National Forest, Oregon. It was a remote area of the range. On the 7th day of my hike, the hair on the back of my neck started to stand up. I chalked it up to being a mountain lion in the area. But the weird thing was the uneasy feeling never left. That night I set up camp, planning to stay put for a few days. That is when I heard the strange howling. It wasn't wolves or bears or any other animal I had ever heard. The closest thing I could relate it to is the noises primates make. This persisted for the next few nights. Something started rummaging through my campsite soon after. I assumed it was a bear or raccoon. But then on the 9th day, I woke up and my food bag was removed from the tree. Something had cut the line and all my food was gone. I decided to break camp and push forward. I had a few days left until the end of the trail and then I could always fish for food. The same nightly activities occurred on the 11th night. By that time, I was sure that I was being followed and something started throwing rocks at my tent. For some reason, I lost it. I screamed into the darkness for whatever it was to leave me alone, hoping it was just some person fucking with me and maybe they'd leave me the hell alone. Instead, it grew quiet for the first time in nights. Nothing could be heard. Then a scream louder and more vicious than any other night cut through the silence. Then nothing. Complete and utter silence again. Despite it being quiet, I wasn't able to sleep that night. I just waited. The next day, I continued my hike, dead tired, just wanting to get out. The hair on the back of my neck still standing, and the forest was still quiet. I felt like I was being hunted. Towards the end of the day, I sat down to rest before pushing a few more miles when I saw it. Something tall and large, bigger than any man or animal I had seen, sliding through the forest, not making a noise. I yelled at it, and it turned to look at me. I never got a good look at it through the trees and the brush, and it was dark. I threw a rock at it and then pulled my knife. This thing just kept staring at me. I don't know what kicked in, but I no longer felt scared. Damn it, I was angry, and I bluff charged at the thing. It stepped back a few steps, then stopped. I yelled again, and this time it took off running to my left. It had long strides and was quite agile. I was very tired and made camp there, and it was a night of silence, thankfully. When I woke up the next day, I knew that I had about 10 miles until the end of the trail. Exhausted, hungry, and mentally drained, I made my way out. As I got closer and closer to the end of the trail, the typical forest noises returned. I no longer had this feeling of unease. I got to the trail's end and sat in my car. I was an emotional wreck. I 100% believed that I was stalked by a Sasquatch, but at the end of the day, I just don't really know for sure. I told a park ranger about it, and he jokingly said they have a bunch of Sasquatch sightings in the area, but most likely it was my own imagination. I still do a lot of long hikes, but that trip was by far the worst.
For our final story of the evening, a serene hike in the Smokies turns into a night of terror for a man and his dogs when an enormous creature confronts them, forever changing their willingness to venture into the wild ever again.
On this particular day, I decided to pack light and hike just a couple of miles into the Smokies. It was a perfect plan, a short trek with my faithful dogs by my side, and the promise of a peaceful day exploring the woods. After setting up camp, we spent hours wandering the trails, breathing in the crisp mountain air, and marveling at the beauty of the wilderness. As the afternoon began to fade, I started prepping to settle in for the night, gathering wood to build a fire and warm up the campsite. That's when I noticed something strange. My dogs, who were usually calm and confident in the wild, were agitated. They barked and growled at something in the distance, their attention fixed on a point deep in the trees. My dogs had always been enough to deter bears, but this time their behavior made me uneasy. Night fell quickly, and the warm summer air tempted me to leave the tent door open to enjoy the gentle breeze. My dogs curled up next to me as usual, and I drifted off to sleep. But I woke up too soon, startled by the sight of bright moonlight illuminating the camp. My dogs were growling low and deep, their hackles raised. Something was out there. I strained my ears and heard it, a strange, thrumming groan coming from just beyond the edge of the firelight. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and that's when I saw it. At first, it looked like a bear, a dark, hulking outline standing near the now cold embers of the campfire. My instincts kicked in, and I shouted, hoping to scare it off. But instead of retreating, the figure did something that froze the breath in my lungs. It began to grow, rising higher and higher, until it loomed over the screen window of the tent. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't a bear. It was massive, more enormous than anything I'd ever seen outside of a zoo. My dogs kept growling, their bodies tense, warning me of the danger we were in. Then the creature let out a sound that shook me to my core. It was a deafening, trumpeting call, a chilling blend of a lion's roar and a human scream. My dogs, brave as they usually were, went silent in terror. The creature bolted into the woods with astonishing speed, and despite my desperate commands, my dogs ignored me and took off after it, their primal instincts overriding my calls to stay. Heart pounding, I grabbed my headlamp and sprinted after them. Their barks echoed through the forest, but the sound grew fainter with each passing moment. That's when I heard it, a maniacal laugh, high-pitched and hyena-like, coming from the same direction as my dog's. Every hair on my body stood on end, but I couldn't stop. I had to find them. The chase felt endless, but the barking and laughter eventually faded into an eerie silence. I knew I had to turn back before I became lost myself, so I returned to camp, calling for my dogs until my voice was hoarse. They didn't come back that night. I sat awake until dawn, my heart heavy with fear and worry. As soon as the sun rose, I resumed my search. Hours later, I found them. They were both terrified and honestly never the same again. Now the woods, once our playground, became a place of fear. My loyal companions would shy away from the forest's edge and tremble at the sounds of the night. To this day, I don't know what I encountered out there. It wasn't a bear nor any predator I'd ever heard of. Whatever it was something beyond explanation, something that made me give up the wilds of Tennessee for good. That night changed everything, and I carry its memory with me like a scar, a reminder of how small we are in the face of the unknown.
Well, that's all for tonight, dear listeners. Here's to a great 2025. I've got some big plans for the podcast coming up, especially on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed yet, head on over to YouTube, search Campfire Cult Pod, and give me a subscribe. Until next time, I'll be leaving you in the dark where whispers linger and shadows dance. Stay wary, sleep well, and beware the Bigfoot in the night. If you have a story to tell, please reach out via email at contact@campfirecultpod.com or leave me a voicemail message at 720-297-8608. You can follow us anywhere on social media at Campfire Cult Pod and online at campfirecultpod.com. And finally, if you don't mind, please rate and review wherever possible.